Thank you guys for checking out another episode of the D-Tub Show. I'm here with two really, really good friends, John and Ashley, and I've been dying to talk to you guys uh, about the election because I really feel like you guys could really give voice to how people are feeling, and you guys are two people that I consider genuine friends and people who I really thought about as election results were coming in. This is a safe place to have a tough conversation over a drink or two with a few laughs along the way. So I will just share with everybody tonight what I am drinking. This is no reflection on the discussion. It's just what I was feeling at the time. Is 1856 Uncle Nearest. And if you don't know the story of Uncle Nearest, I suggest you go check it out because it's a pretty awesome story. The owners are super cool, and I am not getting paid to plug that. I just really like it.
But you're open
So,
to being paid to plug it.
without question, without that, I will endorse, and not everything, but I'll endorse a lot of
A lot of
things,
things.
So that being said, John, what are you drinking and how are you feeling tonight?
I'm feeling great because I'm with old friends, or I'm feeling great because this is a wonderful space to discuss some things that are pretty big out there and can be pretty heavy for a lot of folks. So I'm interested in where the conversation goes. I'm double fisting it, but in a very unexciting way. We've got the water in the left hand. We've got a little green tea in the right hand. I'm recovering from a little bit of a long flight, so I'm doing a little hydration this evening. But yeah, very excited for the conversation.
Awesome. And last but certainly not least, Miss Ashley, what are you drinking tonight and how are we feeling?
I've got some tea also. I'm going with the Mick Ultra, also open to being sponsored. For the first time in several weeks, I'm feeling better.
Good.
And I think being around the two of you is making a difference. I was just telling my husband at dinner tonight that the last time we did this was shortly after being sick. And
What's been
so
time?
It,
Wow.
it's been some time, and while this has a very different feel from January 6th, it's not too far different, but
Good.
we're back together, and any excuse for the three of us to be back together is a silver lining in my books. I'm
No,
happy to be with the two of you.
I certainly support that. So, with that being said, we'll just jump right in head first. So, Ashley, I'll start with you.
Oh, boy.
Now that you have time to process
Yeah.
election results, how are you feeling?
Mhm.
And is it any better than when you first realized that Trump had won?
It's really interesting. So I know John doesn't necessarily feel the same way, or at least he didn't several years ago. Just possible his feelings might have changed. I am a TikTok girly. And right or wrong, I get a lot of my news. I get a lot of influence, right or wrong, off of TikTok. And I saw this really interesting set of videos that said that somehow, some way, and I'd be curious to hear from the two of you if you had the same experience, that there was this collective experience around the country that somewhere between the hours of 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., the night, or if you want to argue, the morning after the election, that people collectively woke up and looked at their phones and saw what we now know as the results of the election. And it's very interesting to me because I'm somebody, sorry, my dog, Lily's on camera. I struggle with sleep. I always have. And so I'm not ashamed to say that I have a prescription to help me sleep. So I'll get usually up, right, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I'm out. And I was awake around 3 something, looking at my phone, seeing the results. And I learned that there was a collective experience that people had generally done that. And just, it's really interesting. I went through a very different set of emotions and stages than I did in 2016. In 2016, it was kind of immediately very sad and lots of not even shock, just very, very sad and angry. And this year I spent a while in shock.
Mhm.
And I think that's something we'll probably dive into as we get further into the conversation, is just why were we so shocked by this? But I did. I felt shock. It took me a couple days before the shock went away,
Mm.
and then I felt really sad. I spent a couple days where I felt like every little thing made me cry. And I'm getting to a point now where I'm grateful that we're doing this podcast a couple weeks after the election, because I think I'm moving towards a position of, okay, now what? All right, what do we do? How do we not just sit sullenly?
Mm.
Um, how do we move forward from here? And so I, like Millie, am trying to look up into being excited and trying to figure out what we can do to make other people smile and to help make the next 4 years better than maybe it felt like they were going to.
And John, before you answer that question, I'll just say I think you're on to something in terms of like collectively looking at the phone, but I purposely wanted to wait a few weeks until after the election to have this conversation with you guys, because I just think to ask you in the moment is unfair, to give you a sort of a knee-jerk reaction. And in the last 2 weeks, I've seen nothing but all these articles written about where Democrats went wrong and how they lost the election. And I just feel like you can't boil it down to one single thing, which we'll get into a little later. But that's exactly why I wanted to wait to have this conversation, because I think you need to absorb it and sort of digest it a little bit. I'm with you, Ash. I don't think it was the literal gut punch that it was 2016, but I have thoughts about why it was surprising. But John, same question to you. Now that, you've had time to process it, how are you feeling about it? And is it any better or worse when you realize that he won the second time? Is it comparable to when he won the first time?
Yeah, so I think for me the experience was so I one of my biggest passions is working the election sites. I love being a poll worker. I think it is a ton of fun to go in for a day with all these septuagenarians who are working from 5 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night and just busy like crazy this year. There were so many people in there who were saying it was their first time voting. We had a line that wrapped around the building from 6:30 to 12:30 in the afternoon before it finally slowed down. And I got home that evening, and you're hyper exhausted from it. And you start looking at the results coming in, and really early on, there were indicators that were pointing in this direction. And yet, in that moment, I was still reassuring myself because we were told this isn't going to be settled election night. He's going to declare the victory. And so, I took a bunch of deep breaths and went to bed. I had an early flight to leave the country the next morning. And so I got up, and at that point, when I got up in the morning, it was fairly clear. And like I pulled my family aside and I said, it's looking pretty strongly like Donald Trump is going to win this thing. And I think, in my older age, I've learned to give myself grace in these moments. There's a metaphor about traumas being rocks in your life. And when that trauma happens, that it's a big rock and you can't really see anything else around it, and it's all you can focus on. And so, I leaned into the moment and gave myself some grace and said, yeah, of course, this is going to be all consuming. I felt myself going through the stages of grief that day, vacillating between denial and sadness and all the different components, and forgot dozens of things that I pack on a regular basis, just left without stuff and was missing stuff for the entire trip because of that morning. I frankly was quite shocked on this one. I may have been blissfully ignorant to the moment. 2016 did not surprise me. This one deeply surprised me. And I would say in the moment disappointed me. I think that as it does with big rocks of trauma, having a couple weeks to separate things out and to start looking at, hey, where is my place in all of this and what can I do to create safe spaces for folks? Because transparently, I think that that's what we're going to need to do, and that's going to be a lot of work for us over the next several years. Is helping out our communities and leaning into that space. So I'm in a better headspace than I was that Wednesday morning. I'm not assuming anything. I really and truly think the guardrails are off at this point. And I think that there is a very natural and slippery slope that we can all go down and manifest the deepest and darkest outcomes possible. And I think that that energy, for me at least, is less effective than going out and looking for those avenues where I can create positive change and help folks out who might be struggling through this time.
Yeah, I think that's all well said. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys was sort of, what do you think went wrong from a Kamala perspective, from a Democrat perspective? Because I see a lot of people writing articles about this is what they got wrong, but they're trying to boil it down to like one or two things. And I think it's much bigger than, one or two different things. I will say my first thought when I saw that it was called for him was a sense of acceptance. Like, okay, this is what it is. Because the numbers, the way they came in early on, she was running at like a Hillary Clinton level when you needed to run at like a Joe Biden level. So it was like, okay, like I've kind of seen this movie before. I get it. This is the way this is going to go. I will say, John, to your point about sort of the way this was sort of build in terms of we got all this momentum and this, that, and the third. It's clear now, hindsight being 2020, and this is my words, not anybody else's, because you guys know me. I am much more pragmatist and much more of a independent centrist type. I don't lean right, left. Like, if it makes sense, I want to go with it. And certain things make sense in certain contexts and certain things don't. But to me, from an outside in perspective, it seemed like Democrats ran a campaign based on vibes, but couldn't read the room. That's what it came across to me as. And what I mean by not reading the room is and I have real issues with Democrats on this. There's a lot of Chicken Little, sky is falling is kind of how they were selling it, like vote for us or democracy ends. And now they are gearing up for another midterm cycle, for another presidential election cycle. And it's like, well, wait a minute. If you guys are going to say that democracy's on the line and it's going to end if we don't vote for you, but you are preparing for the next election, that means you still believe in democracy too. And if you do, why were you trying to scare me out of the vote? And then the other thing I'll mention, which I do think speaks to what went wrong for them, I came across a statistic the other day that floored me so hard. I double checked it today in 2 or 3 different sources, and they confirmed it. 54% of people in this country read at a 6th grade level or below.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, to give you some context, I work for a large Fortune 100 financial services insurance company, and we're required to write disclosures at an 8th grade level.
Mm-hmm.
So if we are writing disclosures at an 8th grade level, but over half the country is reading at a 6th grade level or below, we are not really putting people in a position to succeed here. And if that is what we're dealing with from a reality perspective, how you speak to those people becomes the whole ball game. You can't scare people out of votes, especially if they've got nothing to lose. If people feel like they have nothing to lose, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth. But I'm just curious from your perspective, Ash, I'll start with you.
Yeah.
What do you think went wrong with that campaign, Democrats' approach as a whole? Because clearly they didn't win, and Trump won the popular vote. And to me, that speaks more votes than almost anything else.
Yeah. What I'm about to say is going to oversimplify. And I don't intend to, but I'm thinking in the way that my brain works. And my background is very much in the realm of communication and getting your point across in a way in the business world, right? That sticks with people. And the analysis that I've read that has most connected with me is that one of the big reasons that Republicans won big is that they did very well what corporations in this country who have very successful ad campaigns do very well. And it is that they keep their message very simple, right? When you think about what the Democrats' message was, Kamala had a 12-point economic plan, whereas Trump's answer was we're going to make you better off than you were 4 years ago, right? It was simplicity. And Dennis, when you talk about how do we talk to the masses, I think even if you take education level or reading level out of the mix, even people who are very highly educated, the truth of the matter is we live in a world where we are inundated with information. We have more on our brains and on our plates than we've ever had before. And if you want to get through to my head, you better have it in a simple way that I can repeat and repeat quickly and easily, not only to myself, to the people in my house, to my friends, to my neighbors. And my very quick, too long, didn't read response is Republicans were able to find a consistent across the country message that was simple and easy to repeat, and the Democrats couldn't.
I don't think you're wrong. There's a lot of ways to go with that, but I don't think you're wrong there.
I will push back a little bit on that. I
knew you would.
think that there was a narrative going on at the same time, and I strongly feel that it was rooted in misogyny, that Kamala didn't have a plan. The talking heads, the articles towards the election was that Kamala Harris hasn't outlined a plan, which I found infuriating because on one hand she had. I didn't agree with the plan, and I don't think it was a compelling plan. And then on the other hand, to your point, Donald Trump absolutely did not outlay a plan, and did not put any sort of substance out there. And I think
John, he had concepts of a plan, okay?
That's true. Concept.
that phrase, like the blood boils when I hear that. Because of that reason, because of the misogyny and that, because of the uneven playing field that a Jamaican Indian woman has to live up to in the bar that human being has to hurdle versus what the boomer old white man gets to come up and spout off. And we talk about how the Democrats were at fault because they were spewing fear tactics about the downfall of democracy. The Republicans were spewing fear tactics about immigrants coming to take your jobs. I think
Agreed.
for me,
and transgender men coming into your daughter's
100%, 100%. Both of them, I think both sides were leveraging fear-based messaging. For me, I think the bigger component that I'm seeing come through is that it's all bullshit. It's all political fucking theater. And the common person knows that the political theater only benefits greedy corporations and the ultra wealthy. And so the average person is no longer here for Democrat versus Republican. If I can't go to work and do an honest day's work and understand that after an honest day's work, I should have enough money to put food on the table for my family, to pay for the house that I live in, and to stow away a little bit of money for when my body can't work an honest day's work, then this machine, this mechanism out there isn't working for us. So fuck it. Throw chaos into the mix. And it doesn't matter. And I'm just going to go for whatever's out there that seems exciting and is going to do something different to this.
Yeah, because people want a feeling, and I think people want to blame the Biden administration for inflation when really they have nothing to do with it. They did maybe they did the very best they could. That's not for me to judge. That's for experts to judge. But really, it's COVID, supply chain, all that. But at the end of the day, no one wants to hear the logical explanation. What they know or what they think they remember is that things seemed to work and function better when he was the president. And going back to messaging, Ashley, and not oversimplifying, but Democrats kept saying inflation's coming down, the economy's improving, people are making more money. But the people who go into a voting booth, a lot of them didn't necessarily feel that sort of economic upswing for a variety of economic factors that have nothing to do with this current economic environment and everything to do with structurally how our country is put together.
So, Dennis, I'm going to turn the table around on you for a second and ask you a question. So, if if in your opinion, which I don't disagree, voters didn't want to hear logic,
Okay.
what do you think that Democrats need to do differently in the future to win back that critical part of the country
Mhm.
that does make the difference in these type of elections?
My initial gut thought is Democrats need to go to a place like Danville, Ohio, like Dover, Ohio, New Philly. Don't even say you're Democrat. Go into a diner and just talk and listen to people. Don't try to prescribe to them all these policies about how this policy is going to change your life and improve your circumstances and all of that, because they don't believe you.
Yeah.
They're not going to really believe any politician. But what they are going to believe, and I hate to say this, but I do think this made a difference in the election. That commercial Trump ran that said Kamala is for they, them, Trump is for you, cut through everything.
Simplistic
It's
messaging.
simple. Like one of the best marketing slogans in the history of business anywhere is Riker, we're dealing. It's 2 words. It's to the point. You know exactly what that means.
Mhm.
And for those that are watching that don't know Riker, it's one of the largest car dealerships in the country, right outside Columbus, Ohio. But that's their slogan.
We're
We're like,
dealing.
Riker, we're dealing. And people know what that is. And I just think sometimes it seems to me, Ash, at this point, the way our country's evolved for a variety of different reasons, whether it's social, economic, whatever, people need to be anchored and grounded in something that's very simple that they conceptually understand. Doesn't make a difference if it's right or wrong. But I understood the idea that he is for me and she is for them. People understood that viscerally. And Democrats don't have a slogan like that because the perception now is they are the party that are super elitist. They're not for the working person, that they're nothing but ivory tower educated people who look down their nose at blue collar people who have to work hard every day. Now, I'm not saying that's true. I'm
Oh, I'm
saying
saying that's
that
true.
Perception.
yeah,
I'm
that
saying that's
is
true. Yeah.
right.
I
And what I would
disagree.
say, and I think that's the perception. And what I would say is there are certain Democrats I would argue are not like that at all. And then there are other Democrats that present that way. But whatever it is or it isn't, Democrats have to get better at messaging in a way that doesn't come across as talking
Yep.
down to people, but
Yep.
talking to people. Because you can knock Joe Biden for a lot of different things, but the one thing you can't say is that Joe Biden wasn't an everyday sort of guy that
Yep.
just tried to get into politics to make
From
people's lives
Scranton,
better.
Pennsylvania.
It's Scranton, Pennsylvania, the whole nine. Like that's like it's in his DNA. And I think Kamala has a very similar story, but no one was buying that story, and that's unfortunate. Because I do think she came off as an empathetic figure that genuinely cared about other people and their lives and trying to improve their lives, but nobody was buying it. But I will say this, and I will die on this hill. Regardless of what reason why she didn't win it, the one person you cannot blame is her. I think she did everything a person put in her could reasonably do in that short of a window to run for president.
I agree with you, Dennis. John does not.
That's why we're here.
I think
That's why.
so. I am going to go beyond messaging and I'm going to go to actions. And I do think that there are some Democrats out there who are doing incredible things and who are for the common person. I think the leadership class of the Democratic
There you go.
like Nancy Pelosi, like if we could start by pushing her off a very high cliff, and metaphorically, of course, my lawyer asked me to add that in there. You know, there is a stock trade index that follows Nancy Pelosi's investment.
It's an investment act.
Yeah.
It's a
And it is these folks who are happy with the status quo. When she was asked point blank about whether senators should be able to trade stock, she laughed that away as if a peasant had asked her a stupid question.
yeah.
The way that I learned about Roe versus Wade being overturned I was in Amsterdam and I got a text message. This was my first notification that Roe had got overturned. I got a text message from the DNC that said, well, Roe just got overturned. We really need you to donate $30 to this campaign in order to make this thing get fixed. Are you fucking kidding me? Like that's how I'm going to find out this stuff from you? The DNC is complicit in what's going on right now. The DNC is complicit in allowing this moment in time to slide in the direction it has. And I don't want to hyperbolize about what could possibly happen or what we've opened ourselves up to in a society. And I want to say that like this theater, this game that they have played, they have fucked around and they have found out. They have looked at this more as a money-making scheme. The fact that we are still, the idea that we spend 52% of our taxes today go straight to the military. Bonkers. When the common person, again, can't work a single job, has to work 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet, who doesn't get time off to take care of themselves or their family, lives in fear of breaking an ankle and going bankrupt off of it, and the DNC is hitting me up for $15 to support Kamala, like at 7:45 at night on election night. What are you going to do with that money? Like, come on. It's
Very tone deaf.
Okay, but John, you and I both know that the Republican Party was doing the exact same, and arguably were texting
which
voters who were financially, economically more stressed. And so I don't know that I
They were selling
say that was
Bibles,
just
sneakers, and everything.
which
To
is
your
why,
point,
like, my argument is that it's theater. Like, it's all in this.
for sure. But you can't just say Kamala when it comes to that.
I can, because like, if they really thought, because they're the one purporting this to be a threat to democracy, they're the ones who are purporting this to be a fascist leader coming into play. If a Boy Scout showed up at my front door with a tin of popcorn and said, "Hey, we're getting invaded as a country. You should buy this popcorn," I'm gonna go, "Hey, fucking fight the invaders." Like, that's what we should be doing, not buying your effing popcorn.
So, John, to your point, it came out today, right, wrong, or indifferent. Morning Joe is a very popular TV show. And it came out today that him and his wife, Mika Brzezinski, went to Mar-a-Lago and met with Trump. And what it tells me is that you guys tried to sell me on this fear that this was this existential threat. And then you went down there, just like every other Republican went down there, to bend the knee and kiss the ring. The only people, in my opinion, not only people, a group of people that are going to benefit that I don't think people have considered that are going to benefit off of this Trump administration is MSNBC. Because their ratings went through the roof when Trump was president the last time, because it was nothing but like outrage media. Trump said this thing, and then people are building entire segments on shows around this tweet at 3 a.m. They're going to go right back to that model because it's a moneymaker. But it's disingenuous, at least to me as a voter who is not aligned with any political party, to try to do this bait and switch where you tell me it's all this fear and it's Chicken Little and the sky's falling. And then you come to find out it's not. Now, is democracy going to evolve? Yes. Is it going to get harder for a lot of people? Are there going to be a lot of people negatively impacted by some of the things that, not just Trump, because to me at this point, Trump's a Trojan horse. He is a vessel by which fever dream, far right-wing extremists now get to, almost with impunity, put, the American people through this little social experiment. But again, if you are planning for another election, that tells me you still believe in democracy. So why did you try to tell me that this wasn't going to be around, but you're planning for the next one? Like,
no,
that bothers me, Ash.
I fundamentally disagree with.
I do think that we are in a moment of an existential threat to democracy. I legitimately do think that we are there. People talk about 4 years of this. I don't want to exaggerate in this moment. I do think that concept is under threat in this moment in a very significant. I do agree with everything you're saying on how that concept has been leveraged to increase clicks and increase money for the benefit of a ruling class.
Yeah. But Ash, you disagree.
Yeah, I have a lot of very conflicting feelings. I mean, when I think fear mongering, and this is probably my lens, right? I've got biases just like we all do.
Yeah.
But when I think about the number of conversations we had in this house, football season, we're big into watching football. So we've had the TV on far more over the last couple months than we normally do. And personally, I felt like we were inundated with
Yes.
Bernie Moreno ads. No, let me clarify that. Anti-Sherrod Brown ads that talked about how, let me be clear on my language here. Transgender men were coming into little girls, and that was very intentional language. Transgender men coming into little girls' locker room, and we were inundated with these ads. So I have a very hard time in my head saying the Democrats messed up because of fear mongering, when I feel like all I saw in a
That's fair.
red state were ads that were fear mongering. And so I'm not disagreeing. I absolutely believe
You're
that
right.
Democrats use fear mongering. But at the end of the day, that is across the board. That is an issue of this country. And when I hear you guys say the average person knows that that's theater, I fundamentally disagree with you
I would agree with
because
that.
of the number of people that I spoke to that genuinely were repeating the rhetoric. They did not see it as theater. They saw it as an absolutely fundamental attack on our culture as a country. And so I'm sure you're going to get there, Dennis, but I am somebody, the way my brain works is it's like when I went through a divorce or a job change or any major change in a life. It's like, okay, I've got a short period of time to mourn, to grieve, to figure out like UTF from the past. And then my brain goes, okay, now what? Like I told my husband on the way home from dinner tonight when we were getting ready to come onto this podcast, I was giving him some insight into my relationship with the two of you. And I said, I have traveled to Iowa with John. We have gone door to door knocking 8 years ago. I have gone to protests with John where we literally on multiple occasions protested, whether that be the Muslim ban that was enacted. We went to the airports, and the three of us, I will never forget the day the three of us felt like we were going to be pulled over. And we sort of kind of jokingly made a comment in the car. Tubbs is laughing because you remember. And we were like, well, do we need to have one of the white people go into the front seat so that if we get pulled over, that we don't have issues? I mean, we have been friends for a long time. Like we've been through the ringer of conversations and actions together. And my heart says there's a lot of things that went wrong. And God knows I have fundamental issues with both parties. And I'm having such a hard time doing anything other than looking forward.
Ashley, you said something about the fear that I think is important. Both sides fear-mongered. That is very clear. But I think what tips it in terms of Trump's favor is he personalized the fear. People don't necessarily have a fear that democracy is going to end because people don't really know what that means. What exactly does that mean? And democracy's been around for 250 some odd years. It's not going, people don't really believe that. But what people believe is that a transgender man is going to go into a little girl's bathroom. They believe that that's going to happen, whether it happens or not. They believe that. And when you personalize the fear, it becomes more real. I heard a saying years ago, and it's always stuck with me, that no crime is real till it hits your front door. And and people basically said they're not interested in your pronouns. They're not interested in men going in girls' bathrooms. Like that's basically, and I'm oversimplifying, but that's basically what people have said because the fear got personalized. I don't know what the end of democracy means. It's always been around, but I don't want my little girl exposed to a man in a bathroom. People on a visceral level understand that, which circles back to the original point, which is he has a unique ability to cut through it. He doesn't speak like a politician, and that's part of his appeal. He's not doing the politically correct thing. because I want to wish somebody a Merry Christmas, and Democrats won't let me say Merry Christmas. So for some people, it is really that simple. I think that is an overreaction. If you want to say Merry Christmas or whatever God you pray to. It's irrelevant to
Oh,
me.
so don't give me hell when I say freaking happy holidays.
Right. Exactly. I don't disagree with you at all, but we have not evolved into a place where Happy Holidays and Merry Christmas are on equal terms. We're just we're just not there yet.
Tops, can I share my screen really quick? Because I saw something the other day that I've been dying to share with the two
Please.
of you. Okay. And you said something just now that made me think of it. So let me pull up the right screen here. Okay. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Technically, America is 245 years old. Do you see that right here?
Yep.
Okay. Average age of an empire is around 250 years old.
Be careful now. You're tiptoeing into this fear mongering.
I'm saying when we talk about it, like the point that we get where we stop considering logic and
Yes.
we just go off of our gut feeling,
Vibes.
that the old adage of history is doomed to repeat itself. I saw this the other day, and I thought that was very interesting. That when we look at history is cyclical, and historically, not fear mongering, looking
No, I
at
get it.
logic,
I get it.
historically, we are near approaching the end of a cycle. And I'll be curious to see if that holds true for America, and if yes, what that looks like. I'm off my high horse.
Listen, I appreciate you sharing that because I think that's an insight that people don't have. But at the same time, I think it's one of those things where this is sort of the dark side of the moon of capitalism, is that it sort of puts us all in a rat race against each other towards the top. So now everybody is just basically trying to protect home base. And if I'm good because I've done the right things, then I'm sorry for everybody else, but I have to do what I have to do. And if everybody sort of takes that mindset, then collectively, I don't know how we improve as a society, but that's another conversation for another day. But
I don't think that's another conversation for another day. Respectfully, I think
okay.
that's the exact conversation that we're going for right now. Is
Okay.
what is our way forward? How do we repair this place that we're in, where whether you agree with me or not, the way I look at these election results is there is an undercurrent of a lack of community, a lack of empathizing with your neighbor, a lack of connection, right? And so you're 100% right. In no way, shape, or form am I trying to sow discourse. In fact, what I'm trying to do is quite the opposite. And I think that there are many different groups that you could pinpoint to say that this election targeted. And I recognize that I am uniquely looking from I don't have any choice based on how I was born, except to look at like my unique perspective that I have inherently lived is that of a woman, right? And women's rights were inherently a big part of this election. And I would love to hear from two people that I deem to be men who are good, kind, empathetic, loving men. What are some of the things that you are doing, whether big or very, very small? Because I think small things really do add up. What are some of the small or big things you're doing to help support women's rights over the next 4 years to help make a difference?
John, I'll let you start.
Outstanding. Outstanding.
I know you're not joking about that either. Like that's look, people see this and be like, "Oh, he's joking." Like, no, no, I know you. That's a real thing. You took that action.
Which one?
Right. Well, in based on what I've read and what I've seen, there's no going backwards. We're gonna maintain the status quo, or it's gonna get worse. Mhm. Right. Mhm. If you did it once, you could do it again. I guess for me, Ash, the two things that jumped to mind for me, one is anybody who knows me knows that the one thing I'm always going to afford people is a safe space to vent. So I've had to talk quite a few people off the ledge in the last 2 weeks. I know people that are avoiding the news. I know people that are, tuning out almost everything news and politics related because they're still trying to process it all. I went to breakfast. I was up early in the morning because I had to take the dog out. And my daughter was texting me early in the morning. She says, "Hey, do you want to grab breakfast?" And anytime she wants to see me, the answer is yes. Drop everything and go have breakfast. So we went and had breakfast, and she was feeling the way you guys were feeling, and especially on women's rights. And the one thing I had to remind her, and I've had to remind other people as well, is you have to remember you live in a state, Ohio, that enshrine women's rights in state constitution. So whatever's going on outside of Ohio is not applicable to you. You
For
still
now.
have all of your rights for now, but you still have them. And that's really important in terms of understanding what's available to you, what's not available to you, that sort of thing. So now my question to you guys is, so what do you think the losing side needs to do in advance of the next election? I think we kind of talked about it a little bit in terms of communication, how you speak to people, where you go to speak to people. But
Yeah.
is there anything else you think they should be doing that you think could get people to turn the tide? And the reason why I ask that question specifically is because it's not necessarily Trump I fear or what he represents. I feel like he's a known commodity. What scares me, or what's really not scares, probably too strong a word. What's really sort of something to keep your eye on is he cannot run again unless we get an amendment, which needs 2/3 of the states to pass a constitutional amendment. But Vance is going to come right behind him. And overwhelmingly, his one debate, people kept saying, oh, I like him. He's really slick. He's smart. He knows what he's talking about. To me, that's the guy you have to watch because he now is a younger, more polished version of what you were getting before. So, how does the other side combat that? Because, again, if he's really slick talking, it makes people feel good about their situation. How do you beat that if we're running a campaign on vibes?
Figure it out, man. Wait, you go for it.
Hey,
Hey, hey, hey, watch it.
yeah.
Hurricanes.
Yes, just forget. quick question, because I saw this somewhere and I thought this was interesting. Do you think that Democrats took for granted that the shifting demographics of this country meant that people were going to be more liberal and lean more Democratic?
Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
So what I mean is, from a population perspective, Latinos make up something like 18% of the population now. Black people make up 12%, and Asians make up like maybe 6% of the population. So you add all
Black
that
people
together,
only make up 12%.
it's been stuck at 12% for hundreds of years. That's what it is. It's roughly 10, 12%,
Sorry,
depending. Maybe sometimes it's 13. That's what it is. Because
I don't
honestly,
mean to go down a
no,
side
let's
road. That
to
just
be clear, while you can find black people everywhere, black people are mostly DC, Chicago, Detroit, like Atlanta, Houston, LA. Like, we're everywhere, but we're really concentrated in certain spaces, right?
yeah,
And I'm oversimplifying. But
sure.
if I use those percentages, 18, 12, and 6, that gets me to 36. So that's roughly a third of the population. And those numbers are, on an upward trajectory, especially Latinos, because Latinos at some point are going to be a quarter of the population. I saw somewhere that it was an idea that, you know what, Democrats lean into these shifting demographics, thinking these people would always kind of vote
Right.
their way, because I keep thinking about like an Obama coalition, because that got tossed around a lot, and a Biden coalition of it's 40% white people and 90% black people and 80% Latino and 60% women, and all everybody came together in this sort of, multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy. But this election kind of showed me that the reverse of that is true too. That if Trump gets like, if white people make up, say, 75% of the population, or, 60%, whatever it is, and Trump gets the overwhelming majority of them, and then he only picks off 20% of black men, or he picks off 50% Latino men, all of a sudden there's a pathway for him to be able to win elections too. And I guess my question is, do you think Democrats overestimated that, or is that just a narrative that someone spun? I don't know the truth. I just thought it was an interesting thought experiment that maybe they went down that, because I don't think it's intentional, but I certainly think it's possible that it's subconscious.
I do, but I think it's been over sensationalized.
That's
I
fair.
think that you need a very small percentage of those in order to push to the numbers that we got to. And that's what happened. And I think what happened is when we see, you know, uh, Republicans won the popular vote and all of these different things, it makes it seem like that it's these massive numbers, when in actuality, it took a small percentage of various demographics in order to move the needle in each way. And so 100%. And I think that if Democrats don't address it, those numbers are going to continue to increase
Right.
in those ways. But I don't think that it was a massive component of it. But John, I'm curious as to your thoughts.
Yeah. That's why I was uncomfortable with it, John. I don't like it for the reason that you just described, because I think it oversimplifies it, when I think there are many other factors in play that explain why that side lost. I don't think you can boil it down to that thing.
I agree. Well said.
Awesome.
Well
So let me
said.
ask you guys this. How do you think, uh, what can we do as a people? Let's put political parties aside. What can we do as a people to hold this new administration accountable? Because to me, this is the scary part,
Yeah.
because the people that he's throwing up to say, I want this person over this department, this person over this
Yep.
department. I have never seen a group of people more unqualified for
Yep.
these things. Normally, I wouldn't even pay attention because, generally speaking, let's say the side you voted for didn't win, but they would still put up a competent person. And yeah, have a certain bend and point of view. But this is beyond the pale and extreme. I mean, the idea that we're going to get rid of vaccines and all this other, like it's just so extreme. So I guess my question for you guys is: do you guys have any thoughts on how we hold them accountable? Because they now won the House, the Senate, Supreme Court, and the presidency. How do we hold people accountable who are going to do potentially some egregious things in the name of loyalty and the name of the bottom line? Like, how do we do that? Because I don't have an answer for that. And I think people are really searching for something they can hold on to, a port in a time of storm. Like, what do you guys think about that? And how do we hold them accountable?
Yeah, sorry, my dog was destroying its sweater sleep.
Oh,
Um,
good.
I have two thoughts on that, Dennis. And in the vein of my conversation before, I'll keep it brief. And my first thought on that is I saw something that talked about not having assumptive obedience, which is there are people in power and you go, well, they're in power. We're going to obey. And the how important it is to not look at the next 4 years and go, basically look at it and say, we're screwed. I'm just going to do what they say. And to me, what that looks like is regardless of political party, regardless of people's viewpoint, from the local level to state, to federal, all the way up, continuing to have a voice with uh, the people that represent me. And recognizing that even if I think that they are going to vote the opposite of how I feel, that doesn't mean that my vote means nothing. And so not just saying, screw it, they're going to vote against me, so I'm just going to obey. It's continuing to have a voice at my son's local school board, continuing to have a voice at local city hall meetings, and all the way up, and recognizing that it does ultimately. The second piece of that would be that, and it goes very similarly. And I remember back in 2016, Dennis, you'll remember John and I were very involved in the Bernie Sanders campaign. And I remember when he ultimately dropped out of primary, the message that he had for his supporters is something that I think is very true, regardless, ultimately, of who you support, what party you support. If you feel very passionate about it, the message is, if you want to see real fundamental change, you make it at the smallest level.
Yeah.
You make it in your neighborhood. You make it in your HOA. You make it at your local school level, your local city level, whatever that is.
Grassroots.
Grassroots, but also, like, Pete Buttigieg was a mayor of a small red town in Indiana, right? And look at where he is now. And I'm not putting him on a pedestal, but I'm saying that it starts small. Even if it doesn't feel like it makes a difference, it does make a difference. And to me, my brain is going towards, how do I affect my local community, my local politics, my son's school, whatever that might be, for what I feel is a better future.
Yeah, you hit on the word I kept thinking about, which is community. People need to find their village, find their community, organize, and through organization and community, you can start to hold people accountable. But John, how do you think we hold people accountable? Or do you hold people accountable? I don't want to presume. Mhm. Exalt. It's exalt. That's fair. Mhm.
I'll say.
Mhm. Yeah. Mhm.
Bye.
Well, John, what's interesting about what you just said is, and I don't disagree with you because I think in the spirit of community and this conversation and just knowing who you are and kind of how you're grounded in certain things, you felt a visceral reaction to roll falling and Democrats saying, I need $30 to support the fight. But now you're willing to give, and it's one of those things where it's like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it feels like to give it to a political party, I don't really trust you guys. But the experts that are like for sort of like single-minded on this one thing, I don't mind giving to them, and I think that's good. So I do want to wrap with this because this kind of this that last part sort of leads me into the last question, which is there anything you're hopeful for over the next 4 years? Because I know it's all gloom and doom, and things are going to get changed around, and it's going to get really dark, and it's going to be really hard for some people. But is there anything that you're hopeful for over these next 4 years? Because I don't think it does any good to worry in an existential sort of way. Because I keep thinking about, I'm big into movies and TV. Like I'm a kid of that culture of like 80s and 90s. And there's a line in that second Matrix movie where he gets to the end and meets the Colonel Sanders looking guy, who I guess is the father of the Matrix. And he talks about hope as like the quintessential, like human sort of thing, because it's your greatest like strength, but it's your greatest weakness at the same. I'm paraphrasing, but I don't think it does any good to worry. So, because like I've been having conversations with people, and I've told people, and I know this comes off as very cynical and very selfish in some ways, but for someone who looks like me, people who look like me have been through far worse than a Donald Trump presidency. But I don't want to downplay anybody's fear, because I think that's unfair, because we do enough of that already. So I want to be respectful. If you're feeling that way, then I support you going to therapy and getting the help that you need or whatever. But I don't live in this sort of fear of everything's like we're not going to have democracy. I just think it's going to be different and it's going to be hard for people. But I don't, that's just me personally, but I'm respectful of other viewpoints. So I'm curious what you guys think. Is there anything you're hopeful for over the next 4 years before we get to another election where we have an opportunity to elect someone different?
Hugger.
Yeah. Yes. Yep. Mhm. Mhm. I love plantains. Oh, I love plantain. Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's well said. Ash, how about you? What are you hopeful for?
This sounds odd considering a lot of the things we've talked about. We talked a lot about building community. We've talked a lot about reaching out to your neighbors, doing it on the small level. I find hope in social media. I have seen a tremendous amount of hope in people supporting one another in ways that they never would have been able to be supported otherwise. As an example, I saw something on social media the other day that talked about malicious compliance, encouraging men to download period tracking apps and having them just put in random, obscure data that will just totally mess with how all of
That
the
is
data is tracked.
sinister. That is
And,
sinister.
and very small malicious compliance apps that I think 10 years ago would never have been on our radars. I always joke with people that, I had a hysterectomy a couple of years ago. So when somebody says like, could you possibly be pregnant? I say, I don't have a uterus. I don't have a uterus, but I'm going to download one of those period tracking apps and have malicious compliance where I track the hell out of it. Right. And just to skew data results. And so I have hope when I look at, while there's certainly downsides of social media, 100%, I am excited about the community that I am seeing, the rallying around people that I am seeing in ways that maybe in a small community people wouldn't have been able to find. Social media allows you to find those ways of saying, hey, I can support you in a way that I wouldn't have been able to support you before. Um, And I find that really uplifting. I saw something in the Columbus subreddit the other day where somebody said, hey, where can we find a group for women to get together and talk and support one another and find ways to take care of each other? And a woman commented and said, my husband is ex-Marines and would like to stand outside of our meeting and support us. And the number of men that commented and said, I would love to stand shoulder to shoulder with him. I'm only talking about women, and I recognize that that is from my own unique perspective. So the algorithm is going to give me that, but I recognize that there are communities that are like that. And so if you're watching this and you're part of a community that you feel like you don't have community, I would encourage you to go out to, whether it be Reddit, TikTok, Facebook, something to find your community, because there are people out there like the three of us who are looking, desperate to find ways to get involved, to make a difference, to help out. And I saw something the other day that said the best way that you can build love and trust with other people is not to offer help, but to ask.
Find the helpers.
And
That's
I find hope in the number of people that are asking for help and that are offering for help.
what? Find the helpers? Yeah. I don't know the quote, but I know it's from Mr. Rogers. And it's one of those things where sometimes the simplest answer is often the correct answer. I know there's a thing for that, but I think you find the helpers. I think what I'm most hopeful for is just having this platform and being able to talk to good people like you, because I think sometimes the worst place to be is here because you can overthink it. And I certainly have biases, like you mentioned, Ash, and we all do. And I've got points of view. But what I find is I'm hopeful to have conversations like this that help to change my perspective, even if it's just slightly by a few degrees, to be open to other ideas, because I certainly don't have all the answers. And I know I'm self-aware enough to know that I'm not right about everything, but I'm hopeful and grateful to you guys for having conversations like this, because I think conversations like this and sharing it with other people push it forward and hopefully encourages and gives people hope to be able to have conversations in their own communities, because it's going to be a sort of one-on-one sort of thing. But as long as everybody gets to go into a voting booth and vote for what they think is important, this outcome that we got is always a possibility. It's not to say that you should give up, but how you show up for your community, how you speak to people, and how they receive it is everything. So if we could move away, what I would hope for is we move away from fear mongering, even though I know that's not necessarily a realistic sort of thing. But how do we deal in a reality that says, I acknowledge the struggle that you're going through and I want to help? And here's how we can help in a tangible sort of way that doesn't necessarily involve the government or a political party trying to, because there's certain issues that only the government can solve because the issue is so big, but there's such a massive distrust of government that I just think your community is where you're going to find the solution 9 times out of 10, whether that is your church group, whether it's your your quilting group you meet with on Wednesdays, whether it's your pickleball league, like whatever it is, that's probably where you're going to find solace and community and you're going to find hope. So that's kind of what I hope for. So with that, I kind of wanted to end on a positive note because I knew this would get kind of heavy at times, but I am eternally grateful to the both of you for jumping on here because we have not done this in a while, as you guys pointed out. So shame on me, but we're back. So I certainly hope to have you guys on again soon, but I can't thank you enough because, again, I think you guys really give voice to people who are feeling the way in which they're feeling, and hopefully they take from that they need to get active in their little small communities, and through that community, you can find something uplifting and something to hold on to because it's the eye of the storm, for lack of a better way to describe it, is coming for some people. For other people, it's not going to be that way. But for those of you that feel like the eye of the storm is coming, you need to anchor down into something, and hopefully your community gives you hope. So with that, I can't thank you guys enough. I love you guys. You guys are some of the best people that I know. I'm eternally grateful for you. So please rate and subscribe, like the pod. And with that, we'll holler at you guys later. Again, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. See you,
Yep.
Tubbs.
See ya.